I'll tell you a little bit about my military career. Some of it's interesting. After basic training in Texas, I was volunteered for this unit called a pararescue. And this is an organization where you parachute out of an airplane to save somebody or whatever. Before we can do that, though, we had to go to some schools. Went to the Winter Survival School in Stead Air Force Base in Nevada. And that was a hard school, and we were required to walk around in the mountains for 8 days. No food, no water, no fire, and I lost 20 pounds. At the end of the walk in the mountains for 8 days, then we got sent or taken back down to the base where we had to go through a prisoner of war camp. And that was 3 days of getting yelled at, put over your head and pushed around a little bit and put in a small box. So it seemed like hours, but it's probably just about 30 minutes. And that went on for 3 days. And then we were finished with that school and we moved on to the Army in Fort Benning, Georgia, parachute school. Then down to a advanced first aid school in Mobile, Alabama. And that was kind of a easy enough school, just classroom. And learning how to give people shots and learned all about pressure bandages and things like that to keep somebody alive. And tourniquets. And after that, we went down to what was then the Navy UDT SCUBA school in Key West, Florida. That is, now the Navy has changed UDT. They changed the name to the SEAL training. And that was a great school. Did a lot of running and swimming. But it was a well-run school and one of the best schools of the bunch. I really enjoyed that school. This is a photograph of my graduating class. Up in the left-hand corner, about 4th or 5th from the left, I stand in the back row. Over to the far right is a photograph of Bill Pitzenberger. He would be killed in Vietnam a couple of years later. And in the bottom row is a photograph to the right of Arthur Black, and he would get shot down over Laos and become a prisoner of war for the following 8 years. He would be released about 1973 when everybody else was freed. Pitzenberger was awarded the Medal of Honor. After the Navy school, I got transferred up to Eglin Air Force Base in Florida. There we made multiple jumps, parachute jumps with the scuba equipment, tree jumps with the tree equipment, and all sorts of in-house training. In 1963, the Cold War was still going on with the Soviet Union at the time and Cuba and the United States. U-2s were still flying over Cuba to make certain that the Russians didn't return with their nuclear-tipped missiles. We flew around Cuba on a couple of missions as the U-2s were conducting surveillance, but nothing ever came of it. Interesting times. A few months later, I, along with several other pararescue guys, were assigned the task of recovering 8 camera cassettes that would eject from a Saturn missile. The cameras would be attached to the side of the missile to film the separation of the first and second stage boosters from the missile before the capsule went into orbit. The cameras would fall back into the Atlantic Ocean, and we would parachute into the ocean to retrieve them. These were the final testings before the astronauts would be launched into orbit. In this clip, I'm getting a little assistance putting on the equipment, as putting on a parachute over scuba tanks is rather difficult and almost impossible for an individual to do. In this clip, I'm standing at the door waiting for the pilot to give the command to jump as we are over the capsules. And in this clip, I'm parachuting into the ocean. However, this is a training jump and not the mission of the day. When you make a parachute jump into the ocean, it's pretty routine. You're floating down. As you're floating down, you discard your reserve parachute, which is up front on your chest, and just drop it in the ocean. And as you get closer to the water, when you put your arms up between the risers, which are a couple of straps, and 100 feet from hitting the water, you release the one side of the parachute to Cape Wells, so that the only thing that's holding you up now is your arm. And when your feet hit the water, you straighten your arm out. That side of the parachute collapses, and then you just discard the rest of the parachute and swim away. On this particular case, we hit the water pretty hard. The winds were strong that day, even though we have a modified parachute. We still hit the water. I hit the water very hard, and got rid of the right side, of course, had no problem. But the left side, I couldn't. It was stuck. The parachute turns into an anchor at that point, and now I'm underwater. I'm being pulled underwater, and I don't know how far I'm under, but it's far enough. I pull this, try to release this left side of the chute, and it just wasn't giving up. And I was getting to the point where it was just about the end of me. And through a combination of adrenaline and sheer panic, I'm able to shake that thing, decouple it, shook it loose, and then I popped to the surface, spitting water. Inflated a one-man raft and composed myself for the minute, and then swam over and got the canister that I was aiming for. But that was a very close moment, and I've never had an incident like that before. And I remember that incident. I do remember that incident for the rest, and I will for the rest of my life. It was that close of a moment. A few hours later, a NASA ship would come by and pick us up, along with the capsules, of course. My next fun event happened on August 18th, 1963, in a parachute malfunction. Both the main and reserve parachutes failed to open. And later, 3 days after that event, I appeared on the Johnny Carson show. And here's a clip of that.
Should by all rights have been dead a few days ago. He's a young airman by the name of Michael Leonard. He was on a training parachute jump with the 48th Air Rescue Squadron. He jumped out of the plane, looked up, and found that his chute had failed to deploy properly. He fell 300 feet, pulled the ripcord on his reserve chute, and that failed to open properly. The odds in this happening are astronomical. He fell 1,000 feet and got up and walked away from it. He really shouldn't even be here, but since he is, we are delighted. Would you welcome, please, Michael Leonard. Mike. Well, Mike, what's new? That is one of the wildest stories I have ever heard in my life. Flying myself, as Skitch does, when Skitch came up and we were talking about it, that is one thing I guess that everybody thinks about. Like, I wanted to take up skydiving. You know, then I read about this, and I have kind of reconsidered. When did this happen exactly, Mike? Now, what day was it?
This happened last Tuesday, about 10 o'clock in the morning.
10 in the morning, and everything that I've said so far is true. You jumped out, and it just didn't deploy right, or what happened?
That's correct. About, we're at 1,000 feet, and two jumpers left ahead of me. They were already on the ground. They had made another pass, and then I left the aircraft. I felt a slight tug, and I looked up. I had a complete streamer.
Now, what does that mean, a complete streamer? Just...
Let's see, nothing.
Nothing.
Parachute, that's it, just nothing at all. I made a few attempts to, I attempted twice to shake it loose, and still nothing, so I deployed the reserve.
That's the reserve. That's the one you carry up on your stomach here.
That's correct. Nothing.
What was your initial reaction? Now, you... well, I mean, that's a stupid question. That is not as stupid as you may think, friends. I mean, I guess it is, but what you always read stories about somebody jumping out and their life flashes before their eyes, knowing that, you know, disaster may come, or they may very easily be killed. Now, was there any of that?
That was the last 300 feet.
The last 300. What was the first thing that you started thinking about, just to get the...
About the first 7, I just concentrated on getting the chute open and trying to get it open, not getting it open. And about the last 300, or at 300, in the immediate area anyway, I figured, forget this, I've got 300 feet left, do the best I can at a parachute landing fall. That's concentrating on rolling, feet together, the works. And a little bit of rolling just when I landed, or just before impact. Evidently, everything worked out fine.
Well, didn't you think at that any time at all that this is it? I mean, sayonara? I mean, no, in retrospect, you know, that they say that this happens, you know. But you never thought of that? You just kept working?
No, I figured I made my last jump.
Were you angry at all? Well, I mean, you know... These pretty stupid questions, aren't they, friends? No, but what I mean, you might have got angry at the guy who packed the chute. Right away, this wouldn't be somebody you'd be too happy with, you know.
I couldn't be. I didn't have time, and...
You see, now the parachute landing fall, exactly explain that to the people, what that means. Can you demonstrate for us the way you're supposed to light when you make a regular scheduled jump? Sure. Just briefly, right here. In other words, you're coming down in the chute and you're approaching the ground, and you don't normally look at the ground, do you?
True. Now...
Very succinctly put, Mike.
All right. Now, approximately 100 feet off the ground, you should attempt this under normal conditions. But this is a little abnormal, I figured, so about 300 feet. I have
It's a little abnormal, you think? Yeah?
So about 300 feet, I had my feet together, knees bent, and, well, I had a hold of the risers. That's the 2 main webbings here going into the suspension lines. And I had my knees bent and was concentrating mostly on the roll and partially giving at the same time. And I haven't got room to fall on the floor.
So in other words, the trick is to distribute the weight over most of the body.
Balls of the feet to absorb approximately 40%. And thusly I maneuvered in and landed mostly on this back part of the muscle here.
Kind of roll to take all the weight on your shoulder. Now, what happened now right after you hit the ground? Did any time did you lose consciousness after you hit at all?
No, knocked the wind out of me, and
A lot of people have told me that that tends to do that when you fall from 1,000 feet and without a parachute, that it tends to knock the wind out. So now you're lying there, right?
True that. Well, I felt like I've been crushed. Actually, I don't know what it'd feel like to be run over by a truck, but it's very similar.
Bang.
And I heard people coming who had jumped ahead of me, yelling at me not to move. The adrenaline was still running through so fast. My legs were moving. I couldn't help that. No way in the world. But I didn't get up or make any attempts to get up. But, about 20 minutes later, the helicopter came with the doctor, flight surgeon. He examined me for broken bones and things of that nature, found none. And the only injury was the flight surgeon himself. He smashed his elbow in the ambulance.
That was the main injury, huh? The flight surgeon. Are you gonna continue jumping, Mike?
Yes, I was going to go back up last Friday, but I'm temporarily grounded now for approximately 3 months. but I hope to get back in sooner. I don't know if I can. I want to try and go back up within the next month anyway.
Doesn't bother you to go right back up and try it again?
Yes, it does.
Silly questions I'm asking. Of course it bothers you. But I guess the odds on that are really astronomical of both chutes not functioning properly, right?
That is correct.
Gee whiz. That's the most amazing thing I've ever heard of. But you're going to go back at it and keep jumping.
That's my job, yes.
Well, that's a good answer. You must tell them what your father does for a living. Just to me, when I was found out about this whole story, and somebody said, "What's your father?" We were talking about your folks. And what's your dad do for a living, Mike?
Sells insurance.
Sells life insurance. Mike, congratulations. Thank you for being here. Young man's got a great sense of humor, I'll tell you that. Great questions you ask somebody like that. Were you angry? Yes, a little bit. Is that amazing?
It sure is. He was a little modest, though, I think, because I read somewhere that his commanding officer said that the thing that really saved him was the fact that he made an absolutely perfect landing, the type that
yes,
parachute landing.
Had the presence of mind with all of those things happening to still remember what he learned, and which speaks well for the training.
All right, that was August 1963, and in October, a couple of months later in October, I got transferred to Japan, and I was assigned there for a year. But during that time, I was again back working support of the NASA programs, which were testing again the Saturn rockets, I believe, and launching a spacecraft, all sorts of whatever they do, testing. We were just in support of them. As it explained to us, the missiles or these capsules would come back into space, and they were supposed to land near a Navy aircraft carrier for easy recovery. But if they were off like a couple of degrees angle as they came back from space, they could skip in space and miss the area by 1,000 miles, and that's where people like me could easily fly to that location and parachute in and put the put the cover around the capsule to keep it from sinking. And this lasted. We did made a lot of trips, different spots. From Australia, Panama, New Guinea, Wake Island, Midway, Guam, and there's a few other places I don't recall right now. But anyway, that lasted, like I said, for about a year. And then in the summer of 1965, I got transferred to Vietnam, and there's a lot of interesting stories to tell you about there. I arrived in Vietnam in the summer of 1965. We never made parachute jumps in Vietnam. Prior to Vietnam, I had made just about 50 jumps, all told, but that was over now, and I would never make another parachute jump. Even though I wore a parachute on the helicopters, that's how we traveled in Vietnam, by helicopter. I would never use the parachute I had. It was for emergency purposes only anyway, and I would never use that. And that's a good thing. And I would go down, if I had to get on the ground, it would be by hoist. When we traveled on a mission from one place to another to go pick somebody up out of the jungle, whether it be in South Vietnam, Laos, or North Vietnam, we would travel 2 helicopters and 2 Sky Raiders, SK, I forgot the number, but 2 World War II vintage Sky Raiders. And they were well armed with, I think they had like 450 caliber machine guns in each wing, carried rocket pods and that sort of thing. And their purpose was just to protect us, to show a force when we went someplace, so that the people on the ground that our enemy combatants would maybe think twice about causing us a lot of problems when we're trying to pull somebody out of the jungle. And this is how we traveled when going somewhere to pull someone out of the jungle. The two helicopters, the top, the Jolly Green, the HH-3E, I believe they were called, and then the Sky Raiders below. Always two Sky Raiders and two helicopters wherever we went. These were great helicopters for the mission. We had long-range air-to-air refueling if necessary, and armor-plated for protection, drop tanks for extra range, and plenty of room to bring on board many bodies if necessary. Many of these helicopters, about 50, were lost during the Vietnam War. About 15 or so through accident, the rest through combat. A couple were shot down over North Vietnam or Laos by North Vietnamese MiG fighters. Of course, all crews were lost. And that's about all I know about those. This bunch were, these are South Vietnamese soldiers, and they had nothing to do with our operations. Their job was mainly to provide assistance and protection to the Marine Corps base camp where we refueled our helicopters at Quang Tri, up along the border between North and South Vietnam. I arrived in Vietnam in the summer of 1965, and the first week I'm there, I'm off on a mission up to Laos, pick up 8 or 9 South Vietnamese Rangers from the high mountain areas. They had been injured and wounded in a firefight. So off we go, and we got a hoist operator on board, of course, and he brings all the people up, and they're already bandaged up. They have their own medic with them. And they get on board, sit down, and we take off. We're leaving, heading back to Da Nang. And all of a sudden, I hear the terrible rattling sound. And right above my head are 2 jet engines. And I can't figure out what that was. I thought the engines were coming apart. That's the kind of sound it made, like there's a bolt loose at them. Anyway, it lasted about 15, 20 seconds, and then all of a sudden it was silent. And intercom lit up, and it's Captain Gene Graham. Very nice guy, like him. He came on the intercom and he says, PJ, they referred to me as PJ, parachute jumpers. Easier to say that than a pararescue guy. So he says, PJ, why didn't you return fire? And I said, well, I didn't know we were being shot at. And he's just like an old guy with a lot of experience, and he just replies, yeah, we were. And then we moved further towards Da Nang, and then all of a sudden we were heading to the ground towards an Army camp, and apparently there were too many lights coming on in the instrument panel, indicating there were some major problems. And we get in the ground, and we looked the helicopter over, and sure enough, we got lots of bullet holes. But you know the sound of a machine gun. If you watch a war movie, you shoot a machine gun, it's pretty much all the same. But when you got so many shooting at you at the same time, it's kind of rare. But that's the problem. There were so many shooting at us, I couldn't tell it was machine gun fire. An hour or so later, another helicopter arrived from Da Nang with a maintenance crew and several maintenance people on board. And they stayed and repaired the helicopter while I and the rest of our crew headed back to Da Nang. And that was the end of that for the day. So the following week, we're flying up to Quang Tri. Quang Tri is a jump-off place to go into North Vietnam or Laos to pick up a pilot that just got shot down. The pilots we knew, many of them get shot down in North Vietnam. What happens, when one of them get blown out of the sky, if he ejected from his airplane okay, his wingman would usually report that he got a good shoot, and as he's floating down, we'd try and take off and get to him before the North Vietnamese did. Most of the time, he was captured. So we're going up the coast off the coast a little bit to stay out of the range of small arms fire. And then when we get up to where we need to make a turn inland to get to Quang Tri, that's what we do. And this particular day, we were going across the rice paddies, and all of a sudden, a bunch of tracer rounds come past my head. And every time you see a tracer round, you know there's about 4 more you can't see. So I return fire, and I only get the chance to maybe about 2 seconds, 3 seconds tops of machine gun fire back, and the intercom lights up, and there's a second lieutenant screaming at the top of his voice, panicky, to cease fire. I yell back, "What for?" And he, in a little schoolboy voice, says, "Well, you're only going to make them madder." And instantly, the captain, Gene Graham, again broke on the intercom and said, "PJ, keep shooting, PJ." And so we get in, we land, and there was an ash to him, but I didn't witness it. The officers kind of keep all that stuff to themselves. And anyway, that was that. Well, for the moment. A couple of days later, back at Da Nang, I'm getting ready to go again and putting on my equipment. Because I was outside the helicopter on the tarmac, I have a flak vest, survival vest, parachute was on over all of that stuff. And I'm doing it at the back, outside the back of the helicopter, and these 2 lieutenants approach me. One's in the lead; he's the spokesman of the bunch. And he says to me, "Leonard, you're going to get into trouble over here." And I says, "How's that?" And he says, "You're too quick on the trigger." And I didn't respond. I'm an enlisted guy. I'm a young boy, and he's a lieutenant, and everybody knows that lieutenants are real smart. So he probably knew what he was talking about, I guess. Anyway, that was the end of that conversation. But the major in charge of the unit had a conversation with the pilots the following day or so, I was told, and never heard anything more about returning ground fire. That was him. I guess maybe I was. Everybody thought I was right. Some of the pilots wanted me on board the helicopter, as my hoist operator told me that some of them wanted me on board because they knew I'd return fire, and I would. With the exception of about a half a dozen or so, most of the missions they flew were pretty routine. And one of the exceptions happened not long after I'm in Vietnam. On the Ho Chi Minh Trail, there was a Cessna pilot. He's an Air Force guy that flies a Cessna aircraft. On the aircraft under the wings are rocket pods. These are smoke rockets. What he does is fly along the Ho Chi Minh Trail. When he sees trucks, tanks, and other equipment moving along the Ho Chi Minh Trail, he calls into the command for airstrike. And when the airstrike gets all set up and ready to go, he launches these rocket pods into the target area, and the F-4s, A-4s, etc., come in and they bomb that area where they can see the smoke. Anyway, as pilots, they get a little antsy and frustrated at doing their job. They want to be more active, and sometimes the rocket pods have high explosive instead of smoke, And this guy must have had a M79 grenade launcher. You can stick out the window and shoot at the NVA. But he lost the fight, got shot down, and when we got there, the Cessna he was driving is folded all over the ground. It is had been on fire, burned up. He was in the wing, blackened, and nothing really left of the airplane. So I get on the ground. It's only about 50 foot on a hoist, down from a hoist, and take a body bag with me and lay it out and start to roll him into the body bag, and he comes apart. He's really almost about 2/3 cremated. And in his disgusting job, and this is kind of a nervous time for me too, as the report was that there were like about 10,000 NVA in the area. And that's when I noticed not only this time do we have a couple of the A1s, of course, Sky Raiders overhead circling to warn people off. It's a flight of F4s also circling. So that was comforting. But anyway, it didn't take me that long to get this guy rolled into a body bag and hooked up, and up we went to into the helicopter and out of there. It was kind of I remember that particular pickup for a long time, because that was a really nasty job. Another non-routine mission happened in around November. A C-123, it's kind of like a cargo plane, the type that was used to spread defoliant or Agent Orange along the jungles, crashed a couple of miles off the approach of a runway at Da Nang. And so our crew went out, and I went on the ground, and according to the citation, I went on the ground, and so did the hoist operator. We were both on the ground. Pilot was able to land the ground. We didn't need a hoist at this time. And according to the citation, we pulled these two pilots off the aircraft, loaded them on board the helicopter. It was very dark, black, couldn't see anything, and it was very windy as the helicopter hovered overhead. And the downwash from the helicopter was very strong. The winds were high. So anyway, the citation said that we pulled these two people off and load them on the helicopter, and off we went. I don't remember any of that. It's kind of a scary nighttime mission, and all I remember is just being black that night, really dark black and very windy. And later on, the next day or so, I was informed that we were in a minefield. And whether we were actually in a minefield or not, I don't know. But if we were, thank God I'm Irish. I flew over 300 combat missions in Vietnam, North Vietnam, Laos, wherever. I'll tell you about one more, and then I'm going to hang it up. Dieter Dengler shot down over Laos and taken prisoner, escaped. Didn't know who we were picking up the day we picked him up. But anyway, we got the call that someone needed to get pulled out of the jungle. And so we went over into Laos and got this guy. Came over the top, and the hoist operator dropped the hoist down to pick him up. And then the Dieter fooled around with the force penetrator, which is let me show you. Let me bring a picture of that up. This is what a force penetrator looks like. All you have to do is pull the paddle down, sit on it, put a strap around you, and up you go. Not a big deal whatsoever. Anyway, Dieter screwed around trying to figure it out. And at one point, I told the pilot I'm just going to have to get down to get him on it. And the pilot said, let's give him another minute, which was the right call, because he did figure it out and got on it and started on his way up. And these missions, we take off pretty fast. There was never any debriefing, so I didn't know what I expected to pick up another pilot, just get bailed out. Well, this guy's coming up the rail. He doesn't look like somebody that just bailed out of an aircraft. I'll show you a picture of him in a minute. But anyway, he's I reach over and pick up an M16 to hold on because it's not uncommon for, the Viet Cong or NVA perhaps just to toss a hand grenade. They got on a military uniform, South Vietnamese Army uniform, and toss a hand grenade in the helicopter. So as he got closer, I put the M16 down as his hands were on the cable, so he didn't have his hands on any weapon. As he got closer, we drug him into the helicopter, and he tackled me, went around the leg, wrapped me around his arms around my legs, and I thought, well, here we go. And I pounced on him and ripped his clothes off. It took about 20 seconds, and I had him in his birthday suit. No explosives of any kind. Just put him on a seat, and at which time he explained that he had been a prisoner of war. And he was a Navy pilot, prisoner of war, and so I relayed that to the pilot, and off we go to Da Nang. Here's a photograph of what he looked like at the time we picked him up. When we get to Da Nang, news media are awaiting, and suddenly Dieter Dengler is in the limelight and becomes a folk hero pretty much across the country. Books have been written about him, movies. Rescue Dawn was a movie about him, and all sorts of stuff. And, well, that's all I got to say about that. Well, I will tell you one more thing. Dieter Dengler wasn't all that truthful. He said that the person that ripped off his clothes came upon a half-eaten snake and almost fell out of the helicopter. Well, there wasn't any snake. A lying little son of a bitch. I don't like him. And he told a lot of other BS. When he died not too long ago in Sausalito, California, where he lived, in his home is something like 10,000 pounds of rice. He played this story right to the end, bullshitting anybody that would listen to him. I don't like him. Around the 10th of August, I'm coming back from a last mission in Vietnam. We land, I get out of the helicopter, and as I'm walking to the barracks, I see another helicopter had just landed about the same time, and I noticed PJ and that helicopter stepping out holding his arm. So I walked over to see what was going on, and he's a new guy, first mission, and he got shot in the arm. I flew over 300 missions and never got a scratch. I guess the guy wasn't Irish. This is me standing at the Saigon airport waiting for the 707 that was going to take me back to the USA. Sayonara, Vietnam, and I won't be back.